Mandatory reporting can be very scary. Being a mandatory reporter is a lot of responsibility. I know the first time that I had to make a report, I was in grad school and in my internship and working at a small psychology office and under supervision. There were a couple people in the office there that I was able to consult with. And I remember hearing the information that I thought, oh, this may be a report, because they drill that into us in grad school. And then going into the situation where I was in supervision and saying, hey, I think this is what's happening. And really getting that, getting that feedback and having a lot of emotion come up for me. I remember a lot of fear of the unknown, fear of how is this going to happen, fear of the conflict that could ensue, fear of the ramifications of that conflict. Just really, I didn't have a lot of confidence, of course, being in grad school, and I remember going through all the steps and then having to make the report, having to tell the client, and just, the aftermath of myself emotionally, what that was like. And I think for a lot of us as therapists, this is the scariest part of our job, or the most dreadful part of our job. And we don't want to work with people that we're going to have to do this with. We, maybe avoid that, or we avoid situations that may present these types of issues. And that's not good. We want to be able to handle those in our profession, because it's part of our profession. So my name is Monica Maurer. I am a licensed therapist, and I'm also a supervisor, and I'm the director of my private practice here, where I oversee a group of therapists. And I'm also the director of the Center for Transformation Institute, which is about helping therapists in the larger community to grow, both personally and professionally. And so I think this topic of mandatory reporting is one that needs to be discussed. In fact, I looked on, just kind of searched this morning on some social media sites for information about therapists and mandatory reporting, and I didn't see much, right? I know that times I've had to make reports, I've looked, scoured the internet, and there's just not a ton of information out there for us to help us. And I think that's part of what makes this difficult, is it's hard to maneuver through, am I making the right decision or not? As therapists, confidentiality is huge for us. We want our clients to feel safe. We want them to feel protected. We want them to come into our office space, be able to share everything they need to share. And so sometimes when things come up that we have to breach confidentiality for, and the client's not game and doesn't want that to happen, it becomes a very difficult part of our job. So I think there's a few things we can look at in regard to that in order to help ourselves as therapists maneuver through these very complicated situations in the best way possible. First of all, I think what is really good to focus on is just taking care of ourselves. There's a few things that come up for me personally when a possible report situation presents itself, and that is just, needing to calm my body, because I think going back to that very first time I had to make a report, I have some body memory, some emotional memory that comes up where I go into a bit of a fight or flight. I have to breathe, take some deep breaths, and process through what's happening. Like, okay, I'm a professional. I remind myself these are some of the things that, just are a part of my job. It's not my fault, just talking myself through those things, doing good self-care, trying to get good rest and relaxation, and, eating right, sleeping right, having connection with my loved ones, and talking to colleagues is one of the best things, I think, for self-care in those situations. Really leaning on your colleagues, even just for emotional support, if not advice, saying, hey, like, this is something I'm going through right now, and I just would appreciate your support, even if you don't give the details of the situation, just because we can, as colleagues, support each other just in the emotional realm of things, right? Just be a moral support, so to speak. One of my past supervisor says, hey, this is the reason it's important to work with people in the same office. And sometimes if you are, on your own in your own office and you aren't working with a small group or a large group, you don't have that same accessibility to therapists to say, hey, I'm, going through this and I just need some moral support. It's great. It's just so validating to have somebody say, hey, I've been there, done that. Let me know if you need anything, or, I'm here for you, or whatever. So that's some advice. Take care of yourself. Realize, it's like that whole idea of differentiating. This is not your situation, even though you're having empathy for the people in that situation. And it's part of our job. It's something that we have to do to be above board. So the second thing that I think is important when it comes to mandatory reporting situations is really to be thorough in your investigation of whether or not this is an actual report. Something I ponder so often in regard to these situations is how complicated they are. Each situation has its own very unique characteristics. It's not cut and dry. It's not like, oh, there's abuse here, so I'm going to report it. Sometimes it is like that. It's like, oh, this is a no-brainer. This has to be reported. A lot of times there's really specific nuances to the situation that create a confusion around it, and we have to sometimes get supervision around it and really discuss it with people above us. But I highly suggest also looking into the legal realm, talking to a lawyer. And a lot of times your liability insurance has an opportunity for you to contact a lawyer. It's part of the fee you pay. I think the one that I use gives like an hour a year or something like that. If you have a potential case, you can call and get some legal consult. Also calling your social services in the county where you would be reporting and asking them some detailed questions, even if it's off the record, or calling the local police department if it's more of a police report. I think it gets really confusing there sometimes because different counties will handle things different ways. And so being able to really get the most information you can from the right resources before deciding to breach confidentiality is the best way to go about it. And then as therapists, we go into that whole discussion around, okay, this may be illegal and something I need to report legally, but it would be an ethical breach. So which one am I going to go with, the legal or the ethical? I tend to go toward the legal side because I'm wanting to keep my license and avoid lawsuit and et cetera, et cetera. Although sometimes we find ourselves in an ethical dilemma where the legal side of things probably isn't as much of a problem. If we were to project it out, the risk is less there than the ethical implications of how the report could harm the client. So there's a lot to be thought about and processed through in regard to that. And I think that's a really tough thing as well, because oftentimes a report needs to be made in a timely manner. So to think through and talk to all those channels when you have a full workday and a family to take care of, et cetera, et cetera, it's a lot. It creates kind of a wrench in our day, and we need to be able to handle these things. But it's game on. This is what it is to be a therapist. And then the last thing that I think is really important to think about when considering making a report and having to breach confidentiality is really staying relational with the client. I know it's very difficult because a lot of times these client situations are complicated. They're difficult for us to think through, and by the time we get in front of the client again to say, hey, listen, I'm going to have to make a report, we've been thinking about it so much, and we're heightened, and so we forget to stay relational and stay connected and grounded and help them ground in the relationship and in the information. And so being able to calm ourselves so we can be calm presence for them and ease into the information in a relational way, in a way that is honoring their experience, honoring what they're going through, and bringing them into the reality of the depth of the situation as well is really important. And I've seen that as I've done that, clients have been responsive and the relationship has has stayed in a good way, although that's not always the case. So I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to talking again soon.